The Objective. To deliver the NBA to you like no other. News. Play breakdowns. Power rankings. Storylines you never hear talked about anywhere else. It's all straight shots here, fired by straight shooters. S and Gun. This is the Objective Basketball Podcast.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Objective Basketball Podcast. S here. No Lauren this week, but I promise you, she will be back soon. Instead, we have an illustrious guest, a man that I'm a big fan of when it comes to the basketball media world. He does some great work over at Dime. He does some great stuff at SB Nation, among other places. He just had an excellent feature on Quentin Grimes. This is the man, the myth, the legend, the anti-imperialist, Jackson Frank. Jackson, how you doing, man?
I'm doing well. That's an esteemed intro. I appreciate it. But yeah, I'm excited to talk some West. You know, we've got a little bit of clarity in the East now with about a half week to go. The West feels still pretty dang jumbled, so I'm excited to try and make sense of this mess as much as we can.
Yeah, you're right. And jumbled is like the way to describe this Western Conference. It just feels like it's been that way forever. I mean, it really does feel that way. The top four is almost cemented. I mean, there are chances that Memphis can maybe catch up or Sacramento can kind of leapfrog Memphis, but it's very, very unlikely. So it's pretty much deadlocked that it's going to be Denver, Memphis, Sacramento, and Phoenix as the top four in the Western Conference. And I kind of want to use that as the guiding hand going through for this podcast, because other than that, to be honest with you, it's a bit of a shit show. And it can be decided over these next couple of days where the bottom half of the West kind of lies. I want to start at the top with the Nuggets. They've been the best team in the conference all year. Jokic obviously having himself an MVP type of season. They're fully healthy now with Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. back in the fold. They're deeper than they have been in the past with guys like Bruce Brown and you know, even Christian Brown for a little bit there. Like they can have some flexibility with their rotation now that they didn't have over the last couple of seasons. In general, I feel like some people have cooled off on the Nuggets when it comes to this last month or so. Maybe it's them dropping off and tailing off a little bit defensively. Maybe it's just the fact that they've realized they're going to be number one in the West and they don't care about regular season basketball anymore. But what do you think it is about this last month? Do you hold this last month of Nuggets basketball in any regard? Like, does it concern you in any way that they haven't been as formidable as they've been throughout the rest of the season?
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty sizable data point at this point. I think back to they won that game against Memphis that people kind of thought was going to cement them as the number one seed. Obviously, they have clinched number one seed since, but
Yeah.
I think they won that on March 3rd, so just over a month ago. And since then, they're 7-8. 15 games is a big enough part of the schedule that you can't just hand wave it, especially with the fact that I know they've had some, you know, Jokic's been out for 4 or 5 games, Murray's missed some time, but you can't just throw it away. The offense honestly hasn't been particularly good. You know, I'm looking at cleaning the glass right now. Over that stretch there, I'm on the wrong tab. My goodness, I have 2 different tabs open for cleaning the glass because I have some other stuff I want to talk about. But over the 7-8 stretch, 25th in offense, 12th in defense.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I know Jokic missed some time, but it almost seems impossible if Jokic just played the majority of those games to be that poor offensively with them. So I don't really worry about the offense, but there still have been stretches during the 7 and 8, you know, downswing where the defense looks weird and poor all year. Kind of the swing skill feels like for their defenses, those backside rotations. If they're going to play Jokic just a level, it's MPJ tagging at the right time. It's Gordon. Can you play that weak side roamer if he's not going to be the point of attack guy?
Mm-hmm.
What can Christian Brown do when he's a low man? You know, what can Bruce Brown do around screens up top? So that's what I'm most looking at. So I feel less confident in Denver than I did a month ago for sure, where I felt pretty dang good about their chances of kind of being the team that come out of the West. I don't want to spoil things for later, but fortunately for them, like the West, no one else has really emerged as like, I know Memphis has been playing better as of late, but they'll still have their own questions that we'll address shortly. So for me, I think like part of it too is Jokic, you know, has a tendency to sometimes like overpass. I think, you know, a little bit. That was definitely a problem earlier in his career. I mean, like when he was an all-star rather than, an MVP candidate
Right, right.
or an MVP winner. But I don't worry a lot about that because I think he's been pretty good about alleviating that in the playoffs. So yeah, for me, like I know that they've not been great lately, but all I'm looking for is those back to the rotations defensively, and then kind of what can they do at the point of attack, which hasn't necessarily been a huge issue as of late. So that's my biggest question all the time with Denver,
Yeah.
because I just trust the offense enough. They've got enough shooting, cutting. Jokic can average, in a series, 32 points on 65% true shooting, something ridiculous. So yeah, I don't really worry. I think he's still leading the league in true shooting, which is ridiculous for a high usage player like that. So
Yeah, it's like
yeah,
almost 70, I think, or something along the lines of that.
yeah,
Last
it's
time I
it's
checked,
something
it was
you'd see from like like a Robert Williams or Mitchell
right.
Robinson, someone that gets a lot of plays handed to them and is a great dunker and lob threat, but not a guy who happens to maybe be the best offensive player in basketball.
Yeah. And to me that like what you mentioned, what they're going to look like defensively, it all really does have to do with matchup. So if they're playing a team where drop is not possible, like let's say the Golden State Warriors or the Phoenix Suns, right? Where they're not able to keep him a little bit lower, or they have to show higher, and now like you said, that backside rim protection. I'm curious to see what kind of matchup is the least and most favorable for them right now in the first round. If they end up facing whoever we're looking at, it's probably going to be one of the Lakers, the Pelicans, the Timberwolves, the Thunder, the Mavs. But really, that doesn't narrow things down for us. I mean, there's a bunch of options there. But from the teams that they have the potential of facing, who do you think is their most favorable matchup in the first round? And who do you think is their least favorable matchup? And maybe even moving forward, just in general for the playoffs, because they are the one seed, what are the teams that you, if you're Denver, you don't want to face, or you feel like would be a danger to face?
Yeah, so I think most favorable right now, the Thunder are still holding them that 10 seed by virtue of the tiebreaker over the Mavs. As we
Right.
record, they're both 38 and 42 on Thursday. Um, just because they're undersized, they love to pack the paint. Defensive, that's kind of their MO, was load up the paint and you just kind of bank on being able to recover to shooters. Jokic doesn't really allow for that. Like his processing time, processing speed is incredible, and because they're so undersized, they're gonna have to send doubles. That's gonna leave guys like MPJ, KCP. I was trying to think maybe of a third acronym there, but I couldn't think of one for the Nuggets. But Bruce Brown, Jamal Murray, those guys open, and if they go single coverage, he's gonna get the likes of Jalen Williams, either one. I mean, they go small. I think against the Warriors on Tuesday, they closed with Santa Clara Jalen Williams.
Yeah, yeah,
The,
yeah.
the Warriors broadcast was going Arkansas Jalen Williams and Broncos Jalen Williams. I thought that was a funny distinction, but I guess you go J Will versus J
J
Dub.
Will, J Dub, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
makes it easy to write down. Doesn't really help you when you're talking about it, but
yeah.
they'll close with either one of those guys. I know that a lot of they've played Jeremiah Robinson Earl at times. He might be injured right now. I should be up to date on that, but regardless of what his injury status, he's also undersized center. So I just don't love that. And then the fact that they don't have a true role threat for Shea. Shea is incredible. I wouldn't be surprised to see Shea have a great series against them in a hypothetical playoff matchup, but the lack of a true role threat to put pressure on the backside or make them focus on anything but Shea in a pick and roll,
Right.
or a Giddy or a J Dub. Um, just kind of, I think Denver would be pretty comfortable again in defensively in that matchup. So that's the one I think makes the most sense for them. Obviously, it coincides with that being the 10/11 seed, but I think even schematically it helps them. And then on the flip side, it's going to be the same thing where I think the Lakers are the least good matchup for them. Partly because I think the Lakers are better than the 7 seed the way they've played since the trade deadline. Even since Braun came back, I know Braun's been up and down. Was very good against the Clippers and the Jazz for that matter on back to back. That's encouraging
Yeah.
if you're a Lakers proponent or fan, whatever it is. But I think back to that game that the Sixers won a few months ago when kind of the big flip was them coming out of the second half and putting PJ Tucker on Jokic and having him beat rum off of Aaron Gordon. And the Lakers could pretty much do a similar thing, right, with putting Jared Vanderbilt on Jokic and then having AD rum off of Aaron Gordon. I
Mm-hmm.
would argue that AD is even better equipped for that role because he's a little rangier. He's not necessarily the same level of rim deterrent. I think he's an incredible rim protector, but I don't know if necessarily the rim deterrence is the same as Embiid. But he's probably even better covering ground. I would say he definitely is better covering ground than Embiid. So that would worry me at the same time. I would wonder like how much can the Lakers afford to play Jared Vanderbilt?
Right.
They've played him kind of in that 20 to 25 minute range. They don't close a lot of games, and they like to go with more of a floor spacer and their ball handler a lot. So that would be something I worry about in the fourth quarter. But I just think that plus the lack of like a really, really like top tier wing defender. I think AG is really good, but he's also in a tough spot where they kind of need him to play both point of attack and backline help. I know MPJ has gotten a lot better that last couple of years when he's been healthy, but you still need kind of two of those guys, I think, especially with like you need two more protectors. Obviously, Jokic doesn't offer you that, so
Right.
that's where I worry. But yeah, again, it's also the talent level. The Lakers have quite a few different guys who can create their shots from the perimeter. They're pretty big now on the front line and mobile. You think about guys like, the two I mentioned, LeBron, obviously, Rui Hachimura. I don't think is particularly good defensively, but I think if you're looking for ways for him to offer value on that end, the game against the Wolves is really interesting. He gave Cat some issues, forced him farther out on his touches and his catches. So and then you throw in a guy like Troy Brown Jr. is more of a wing, but is shooting the ball confidently from three, good hands, decent connective passer. So I think that's a team that is, like the way they're constructed now is kind of the quality of a 3 or a 4 seed, maybe even higher than that.
Hmm.
And that's not a team you'd want to face in the first round if you're any sort of
Right.
team. So that's kind of where I lean, among those four play-in options at the moment.
Yeah, fair enough. I'm really interested to see if even past the first round, because I'm not sure. And like to your point, I think the Lakers are better than a 7 seed right now, and I imagine because of that they will win that playing game, even if they are in the play in and stay at 7 at the very least. When it comes to the Nuggets, I'm curious, and I think this it's really comes down to this for me. It's Phoenix and Golden State, and maybe that's being too, I guess, pessimistic about the Nuggets and how they might look defensively against the Warriors or against a mid range shooting team like the Suns with Booker and KD and Chris Paul kind of in the fold. Am I right to be concerned about that? Do you think that the Nuggets this year have shown a little bit more versatility defensively? Because they have tried certain things, right? They have attempted to do different things in the pick and roll, but the success rate of that hasn't necessarily been the best. So I don't know. Am I right in being worried when it comes to
Yeah,
those
I
matchups?
think for sure because they're not a versatile defensive team. I think that's kind of been, and maybe it dates back farther than when I first started really intently following the NBA about 4 or 5 years ago. Obviously, I followed beforehand, but not to the degree that I do now, and
Yeah.
my analysis reflected that for sure. Um, but like defensive versatility, I think is such an important part of like I think it's such a hallmark. Like people always talk about after a team makes a finals or wins a championship, like, oh, this is the blueprint. No, the blueprint is just to have a lot of different
A
ways to
lot.
defend the
Yeah.
team. And
Hmm.
I think if you're looking to be optimistic about the Denver Nuggets from a title hope perspective, it'd be the opposite side, right? Where they're very versatile on offense. We tend to think about the versatility of coverage and ball screens offensively, but they're very versatile on offense. So, yeah, I think you're completely reasonable. Like I think back to the biggest reasons that I think the Suns lost in the second round last year was obviously Chris Paul, not being the same pick and roll maestro self, but then also the fact that the Mavs did really well to take away those Chicago actions, right? That Booker loves, the pin downs and the dribble handoff. Dwight Powell hedged really well. They trapped. They had the backline rotations were good with Bullock, at the point of attack as well. DFS.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and that was kind of how they slowed those guys down. I don't see that kind of that rangy big man like a Dwight Powell on the roster. You could say Aaron Gordon is a rangy big man, but I mean, for as small as Dwight Powell is, he's bigger than Aaron Gordon, and he's an actual starting center.
Right.
So that's where I worry about that matchup. And then you throw on top of it that okay, maybe CP does struggle, and maybe Bruce Brown, KCP, Christian Brown, Aaron Gordon give him issues and wear him out. Okay, we'll just run more of the offense through Booker and KD, and then you're left like where like how can you slow KD? And I think we'll talk more about Phoenix later, but like there's not a Celtics like defense in the West, especially this year. With all the different guys they could throw at him, all the different hands they can put on on his gathers, on his dribbles, things like that.
Yeah.
KD last from that first round, obviously he struggled pretty significantly. So um, yeah, I think that there's definitely valid reason to be concerned about their defense. And
Yeah.
like I said, if you're trying to be optimistic about okay, maybe the defense is pretty rigid, like the offense is where that versatility lies and kind of where they can find those multidimensional aspects.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting, man, because the Nuggets have been, again, the best team in the conference for pretty much the whole year, and yet still there's so many little flaws that you can poke at and say, hey, this is the reason why they may not be the favorites. This is the reason that they may not be the ones to come out of the conference. It would be an interesting bet to make to say that the Nuggets would go ahead and move on here. Folks, speaking of betting, the NHL, the NBA, Major League Baseball is back. So much to talk about. We're talking about it right here with Jackson. It is bananas. Play pinata picks, March Madness, all that stuff. Minute Madness, exclusive games you can't play anywhere else. Use that QR code on your screen at the bottom of your screen there. Download it. Visit sportsinteraction.com/SDPN 19 plus. Please play responsibly. Okay. So we've sort of talked about the Nuggets here, and I want to shift over to the Grizzlies because they've looked great, and they've done so despite some injuries to their guys, despite Morant being out of the lineup, and obviously you can say with that what you will, but like they have been very formidable regardless of who's in the lineup. Now they had a stretch there in January and February where their offense didn't look the greatest. And I think Steven Adams, him being out and the screen setting of him, it really kind of stopped their half court offense a little bit. But they still do have a ton of weapons offensively. When you have Jaren Jackson Jr., who has looked like a more potent scorer, if you will, over these last couple of weeks, and obviously John Morant and Desmond Bane, you still have a lot of weapons. Are there any concerns right now, just off the top of your head, when looking at the Grizzlies and their playoff hopes? Because guys, like they are the second best team in the Western Conference. I mean, they've won 50 games. They have a potential to win 52. That's a very good record for a West Coast team. Why is it that I'm hesitant to say that this team is, hey, let's put them as potentially the favorites to get to the finals?
Yeah, well, I think it's similar with the Nuggets, right? There's a prove it culture around NBA analysis, right? You look in the on the East, on the Eastern Conference side of things, the Sixers have really good metrics. They have the likely MVP in Joel Embiid. They have an
Yeah.
all-star point guard in James Harden, a great third option in Tyrese Maxey, a pretty good fourth option in Tobias Harris, and people are still skeptical of them because they've never made it past the second round with this Joel Embiid led team. So it's the same thing we do with the Bucks. It's what people did with the Celtics to an extent as well.
Right.
It's just kind of the way it goes. The playoffs are so different than the regular season that you have to feel confident in kind of, can this team win in a bunch of different ways? Like, is there one thing kind of tying everything together? And if that gets neutralized, do they fall apart? With the Grizzlies personally, as optimistic as maybe I am, generally speaking, about Denver, I find myself kind of on the other side of the coin with the Grizzlies. I just don't think there are enough ways for them to win on either end, and even if or when Steven Adams comes back, obviously, I hope it's soon. They've kind of had some weird shifted timelines. I want him to be as healthy as possible. But he's really important to what they do. They kill you on the offensive glass. He's the best offensive rebounder in the NBA. He's
maybe
really
in
good.
NBA history. Maybe in NBA history.
Yeah. I would love for Ben Taylor, or someone who's much more adept than me, the historical side of things, to give us a video breakdown of the best offensive rebounders in history. But yeah, obviously they're going to crush you on the offensive glass. They're going to set a lot of screens. Adam's going to do kind of the famous Gortat steal to help Ja and other guys who get downhill, Tyus, maybe even Bane at times. And at the same time, I worry because Adams isn't versatile defensively. He's going to play drop. He's going to play a lot of deep drop. He's not mobile, and he doesn't really give you much in terms of like a release valve as a pick and roll partner. Obviously, like I said, the screening itself and kind of the secondary screening, whatever, is really useful. I'm not trying to diminish that, but like you do need to have, especially with the lack of space the Grizzlies have, you do need to have like someone who the Ja can pass to. Right, Ja's had so much on his plate this year. I think that's part of the reason his scoring efficiency hasn't been great.
Right.
Just because a lot of times, like the best option for Grizzlies is like Ja just throw something up and hopefully you can get a rebound, or Steven Adams can, or it goes in. Try the most ridiculous acrobatic finish you can. And so I just worry about that deep in the playoffs. I think back to last year where they elected not even to play Steven Adams in the first round.
Oh yeah.
Whether that was the right decision, I don't know. Obviously, they won the 6 games partly because they had some great, fourth quarter and second half runs. Partly because the Wolves were a team that kind of all year floundered in the clutch, and that continued to be the case in the playoffs. So yeah, I just worry about how important Steven Adams is and some of the important things that he puts on the table, but also at the same time takes off the table in other realms. So that's my big worry there. And then again, just the lack of shooting. I know they added Luke Kennard at the deadline. He's been shooting the absolute leather off the ball all season, but especially post deadline. I think he's at like 53 or 54% like 25 games with the Grizzlies, which seems like impossible. But again, he's Like I just worry about kind of how teams can exploit him defensively. I think I was watching a recent Grizzlies game, maybe against the Magic, and the Magic are not an adept offensive team, and they were posing some big issues, involving Kennard in action. So that those are some of my big issues. Like, okay, yeah, like if Bane's your only high level floor spacer, aside from Kennard, like Kennard play a lot? Can you get both those guys in the court at the same time? I think Dan Devine of Yahoo Sports tweeted out something a couple days ago that Bane Kennard lineups are just shredding opponents. So that's optimistic. So if they can play together, that definitely would change my tune on them because those two really, really good floor spacers, movement shooters would open up a lot for the Ja Adams pick and roll. Jaren doing his thing as a face-up scorer, mismatch scorer. But yeah, I just worry about kind of the lack of point of attack depth defensively and the lack of you know, shooting. Like they don't have horizontal or vertical spacing,
Mm-hmm.
especially without Brandon Clark for the year, unfortunately, because of his injury. So I just can't get to like beyond a second round ceiling with them. But, I probably would have said the same with Dallas last year. So funky things happen. You get the right matchup, you find a scheme to exploit, a tactic to exploit, um, like the Mavs did last year. Then things can change. But I just feel a little bit. I think they're just probably one player away. They kind of remind me of the Cavs, not in all ways, but just like I feel like they're one player away from really, really challenging for the utmost echelon in the NBA these days.
Yeah.
And fortunately, that they're both those teams' cornerstones are young, so they have time. But yeah, just kind of one piece away. And then, like I said, the Adams stuff and the floor space are kind of my big hesitancies.
You sort of mentioned it earlier with Denver, and just like scheme versatility and just being willing and able to change things up on the fly. What up? What up, doggy? Don't worry.
Yeah,
Don't worry.
she's going for it.
We've had dogs and cats on this podcast. You don't have to worry at all. It's no problem.
Yeah, I'm dog. My mom's away this week visiting her parents, so I'm dog sitting for the week, and
It's
she likes to guard and notify when the dog walks by. So
there you go. There you go.
sweetie, hey,
Oh, this is a gem. This is a gem right here.
hey, Lilo, hey, come here, come here, come here. All right, well, I think we're good now. I think
Yeah,
I think
no,
I
I
got our
think
attention. All right,
right, yeah. No, but
all right. You're
you
talking about scheme versatility with
yes,
Denver. Kind of
I was talking about scheme versatility. So no, but you mentioned like the tools in the toolbox type of thing. And I think with Memphis right now, the issue is that two of their tools are not available, and it requires you to play guys who you wouldn't necessarily be playing in a playoff spot. When you don't have Steven Adams, when you don't have Brendan Clark, there's okay, are we trusting and relying on Santi Aldama to be able to be the guy that we
to
can throw into
himself.
a playoff
He
rotation?
just left Wednesday's game. He took a hard fall. I don't
Oh,
know if
he
it's a
did.
serious
Yes, you're
injury,
right.
but
You're right.
yeah,
Yeah.
he didn't
So
play much of the game. Yeah.
yeah. So I mean, no. You're right. I actually forgot to mention that. So there's this level of questions of like depth and how deep can this team really be in the playoffs? What are the tools they can go for in the playoffs that can look different versus different teams? I think that's my thing with Memphis right now is that they do seem a little bit too one track minded with the way that they approach the game, and that's not necessarily because of the scheme or whatnot. It's just the fact that they're missing some of the guys that can change the way that they can play.
And I think a lot of it too depends on Jaren Jackson Jr., right? Because for the lack of viability or kind of the lack of versatility Adams has in ball screen coverage, I think Jaren's the opposite, right?
Yeah.
Like he's become really, really good in drop, playing that 1-on-2. He can switch at times as well. He can hedge and recover. I think he's pretty good at that. But as to the degree that like his foul stuff is overblown, like he still struggled a lot with that last year in the playoffs. So like if you can only play him 25 minutes, then that's an issue. But if you can get him up to 36,
Right.
37, 38, and you can play him at the primary five for 20 of those minutes and not worry about the foul stuff, then that totally changes the tune. So I think that's where my point of optimism would be with this team is like can Jaren level up to like really play the heavy minutes without getting in foul trouble? I think he's definitely gotten better at it, but like there's just times still where you can kind of tell he's got the devil on his shoulder where he wants like
Wants to
he
get that
just wants
block.
to go for that block, right? He's gotten a
Yeah.
lot better at the timing and the discipline and kind of controlling his limbs so he doesn't just crash down on guys. But like sometimes the devil beats the angel in some of those
Yeah.
rotations,
It's
and
also yeah,
that's
no,
where I
it's
learn.
you're right. You're right. And it's also like, look, when the point of attack defense, you can't really trust on them to get stops. You're going to be facing a lot more shots at the rim, and that just means more probability that you're going to get called on some of these fouls. So it's just look, if you're bleeding points at the point of attack, it just makes it that much harder for a guy like Jaren to be able to stay in the game. So
Yeah,
that's
and as good as Dylan Brooks has been defensively this year, especially
yeah,
on the ball, like I this came to my mind because I just watched it this afternoon, but the Grizzlies Pelicans game in the first half, like a lot of the things that the Pelicans did well to kind of unleash Brandon Ingram last year was he would catch the ball at his spots, kind of on the move, and Dylan Brooks is doing a tremendous job of denying him that stuff. They're
Hmm.
bringing help with Jaren Jackson Jr. And in the second half, they're like, okay, let's just have Brandon initiate the possessions, and he was great in the fourth quarter, and Brooks was just a little too small and he used Ingram used his aggressiveness against him. So like that's kind of where that I think Brooks is a really good on ball defender, really good off ball denier, things like that, but just isn't quite in that top tier of discipline and size and instincts to where I think he could really like be a dominant force up top with Jaren. So maybe I get proven wrong. Like again, I've been a
Yeah.
little bit of like I've been lower on Brooks as a player for a while. I do think he's been pretty dang impressive this year, so I do want to give him his flowers there. But I just don't think he's quite in that top tier of wing defenders. Some of it's physical limitations that he can't control, some of it's
Yeah.
habits that he can control. So, um,
Hey, he's a
that's where
Canadian guy.
I'm.
We're fans up here of Dylan Brooks. I know he doesn't have a lot of fans in the NBA world, but we kind of look the other way. We turn the other cheek, if you will, when it
Yeah,
comes
sometimes
to.
you gotta do that. But yeah, so that's where I stand. I think if Dylan Brooks was 2 inches taller, I would maybe feel a
Yeah,
little
yeah,
different, which feels unfair to him and the Grizzlies. But that's kind of the name
yeah.
of the game. Sometimes height, size, strength, those kind of inherent traits, win out or lose out in these sorts of things.
Yeah, yeah. All right, cool. So we've talked about the top two. Want to switch over to the fun, run and gun, enjoyable, best story of the season, Sacramento Kings. I mean, like they are the best offense in NBA history right now. They have been absolutely incredible to watch. They're one of my favorite late night watches in the NBA. I mean, genuinely, they're so exciting to watch between Fox and Domantas Sabonis. Then you have guys like Kevin Huerter and Keegan Murray, who just broke the rookie 3-point shooting record. It's great stories all around. But it seems like there's been a lot of talk about teams potentially angling to face the Kings in the playoffs in the first round, kind of a paper tiger sort of situation. Um, do you think that's fair given the defensive concerns? I know I didn't mention any of the defensive concerns just now, but they are not the greatest defensive team. They don't have a lot of size, like we mentioned earlier just now with Dylan Brooks. They don't necessarily have a ton of size as well. Do you think there are concerns? Do you think teams angling to face a Sacramento Kings in the first round are fair to be angling? Or do you think the Kings have more? Are we sleeping on the Kings, if you will?
I think it's fair. I think the Kings can definitely win a series, which like is incredible. Like this team is really good. I do think it's a bit of a bummer, kind of like you can definitely see the discourse starting to turn with them a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, but the reality too is like this team has been really healthy. That's not their fault at all. Like it's good to be healthy, but that helps you win a lot more games than if you're the Clippers, the Lakers, the Warriors, the Suns, the Grizzlies have had, Jaren Jackson missed some time, Ja missed some time, Steven Adams missed half the year, Bane missed about 20, 25 games. So like you look at like their best players, like Harrison Barnes played 80, Davion Mitchell played 79, Sabonis 78, Keegan 78, Malik Monk 76, Herder 74, De'Aaron Fox
Yeah.
72. Like that's really good availability, and
That's
that's important.
amazing. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's like
that's
record
why they
setting.
might win 50 games this year. Like that's why they're a really good team.
Right.
But like I think the way I'll put it, I think the gap in record between some of these lower seeds and the Kings, I would say overstates the quality
Mm.
of the gap in quality of these teams, if there is one. Like if you think the Kings are better than some of these lower seeded teams that we kind of mentioned a bit earlier in the play-in, or even the six seed, like who is the six seed right now? I think it's the Warriors or the
Warriors. Yeah.
Clippers.
Yeah.
Yeah, or the Clippers are five. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think there are it's justified to maybe want to play them, over the Nuggets, over the Suns, over the Grizzlies to an extent. Obviously, I make clear that I'm not, the biggest, Grizzlies optimist, but
Yeah.
um, and my big worry with the Kings is the fact that like and maybe this how do I like they try on defense. It's just a bad roster personnel wise
It
defensively.
is. Yeah. Yeah.
There's no rim protection. Their best point of attack defender is a 6'1" guard who doesn't really work well off the ball, and that's kind of the key to playing it well in the Demonis Simone's offense.
Yeah.
Like he's good in his dribble handoffs, getting downhill. Davion is. He's been a really good interior scorer this year. The three ball hasn't been there, but think I want to say last time I looked at his numbers, he's shooting like above league average on twos, which is impressive for a small guard.
Yeah.
Finishing pretty well, I think. I could be wrong there, but I checked that maybe a week or two ago. But that's kind of the issue, right? And then their second best point of attack defender, like I think Fox has been better this year, but like I don't think he's great. Like I don't think you want to enter a playoff series like trusting your defense going to Darren Fox, our second best point of attack guy. So um, that's where we're like I think Harrison Barnes is like he can do some stuff as a rebounder and give you some size, but like pretty stiff laterally, not good getting around screens, not going to give you any rim protection. Sabonis I think is honestly been pretty solid this year defensively. They're playing him at the level a lot.
Yep.
They're icing and pushing a lot of screens to kind of let him use his strength and size to kind of shrink the floor as much as possible. But like when teams get to the rim, like they just the Kings just don't really have much of an answer, unfortunately.
No real
I
rim
think Keegan's shown spurts of being that perfect ideal guy next to Sabonis on offense and defense. You've seen some impressive kind of rotations on the interior, but he's a rookie and kind of the speed of the NBA gets all these guys. I think he'll be a lot better there next year. Trey Murphy was the same way last year, where like you saw some flashes of weak rim protection and tagging as a low man well, and it's gotten a lot better this year. So I expect he can do the same way. But yeah, I just think kind of between how healthy they've been compared to some other teams and the fact that their defensive personnel just is flat out pretty poor. I think it's reasonable to kind of maybe want to be angling to play them. I don't think anyone should be like I don't like when teams tank to avoid.
Right. Yeah.
Like I just think you got to go through. You got to go through. Like maybe that makes me an old head for that statement, but
No, the
I just think
basketball
like
gods are never in your
like if
favor
you want,
when
yeah,
that.
exactly.
Yeah.
Like if you want to win a title, you're gonna have to play hard teams. Like you're gonna have to beat anyone. You're gonna have to beat teams that play different styles.
Yep.
Just play those in front of you rather than kind of angling to or whatnot. But yeah,
Davion
so
Mitchell,
those are
by the way, is finishing 67% of his shots at the rim and 54% of his shots in the mid range, which is that's actually very good. So
yeah, he's got a really nice like deceleration like snatchback pull up that he likes from the free
Mhm.
throw line. But yeah, that's kind of my worry is that like he's your best point of attack option, and then I think there are other like best options on that end. Or Kessler. I almost said
Kessler,
Walker Kessler. Obviously, he's a different
there's a lot of
young guy
Kesslers.
on it.
Yeah, I don't know
Kessler
what it is.
Edwards, who was a very good shooter at Pepperdine, but hasn't quite found the stroke overall in the NBA. I don't know what he's shooting with the Kings specifically. I know he's kind of bounced in and out of the rotation since
Yeah,
joining them
yeah.
at the deadline. But like as they look down the bench and try to find more defensive minded options, the kind of all this spacing, movement, shooting, running, gunning persona, or ethos kind of declines with every defensive minded guy you bring, and that's kind of the nature of the NBA, right? Is that like these
Hmm.
defensive minded guys tend to be less offensively inclined unless you are a Giannis and Embiid, whoever it is.
Right.
Like that's what makes them, MVP candidates, and in Giannis's case, an MVP winner. Um, so yeah, that's kind of my worry with the Kings. I just think they have to make too many concessions with their offensive identity to be a formidable defense, or at least try to be a formidable defense. And like I just worry. Like again, like I've watched a lot of the games this year; they've been super fun, but like they just try really hard on defense. It doesn't work. It's not their own issues. Like they're just not
They're just
players who are inclined to like build a good defense around. That's why they've been a great
yeah.
offense and a bad defense, but they still have 48 wins, I think. So
Hmm.
it's tough to nitpick too much especially when you're looking at it from the perspective of the Kings, who have been, down on their luck for a while and have a very good team this year. So
Yeah.
definitely they could win a series. I don't know if I would pick them. It depend a lot on who they face, but yeah, they're having a great year. And I don't want to like talk about them too negatively,
Right.
but I do think that like a first round series would be quite good against certain teams that they could face.
So I'll ask you the question: which team would you be more? I mean, look, it seems like they're going to play one of the Clippers, the Warriors, Lakers, maybe the Pelicans, depending on what happens here. Again, it's crazy to say this because there's only 3 days left in the regular season, and again, shit show. But who would you say is the team that you would like Sacramento the most against between those four that I mentioned?
Yeah, I think if you're a Kings fan, I wouldn't mind the Clippers. I know that people, some people their optimists have kind of talked all year about like, I'm still on the Clippers, things like that. And that's fine. Like I'm not here to like begrudge anyone for thinking that way, but like this team
Yeah.
hasn't. I know that Kawhi's missing time, PG's out now, but like even before PG missed, I think he's been out 2 weeks now roughly with his hyperextended knee, I believe
Yeah.
is the injury.
Yep.
He's supposed to be reevaluated within the next week or so.
Yeah, he might
That's
miss the first
latest.
round, but it's still up in the air. Yeah,
Yeah, hopefully, prayers up to him that he's back as quickly as possible. But like
absolutely.
even when like I know again Kawhi and PG missed a lot of time, but like they had a negative point differential when those guys, were both healthy at the time. I'm
Hmm.
not saying they had a negative point differential in every game those two have played together, but they still have a negative. Like it's just hard for me to get in on that team. But anyhow, specific reasons I like them for the Kings. They don't pressure the rim much, so like you're not going to exploit them as much defensively. It's a shooting heavy team. They kind of just go with kind of Kawhi and PG shot making when obviously when PG is available.
Yeah.
A lot of mid range ISOs can get stagnant. We all saw that last possession against the Thunder a couple weeks ago. Obviously, not everyone was Lou Dort in terms of that lateral quickness and strength combination, but that's kind of been their MO at times, is like just trying to mismatch Hunt to a fault. It's not a quick decision making team either. Like it's just a bad offense, despite having two superbly talented wings in Kawhi and PG. They don't pressure
Yeah.
the rim, like I said. They don't have a ton of size. I know they have Zubats, but like I could see a world where like the Sabonis is moving and running and gunning a lot, and they're kind of they're moving side to side, and Lou decided to go away from Zubats. We've obviously seen him be pretty willing to reduce
Yeah,
Zubats' minutes in the
I
playoffs.
I think in that crazy Clippers and Kings game that went to 170, it was actually Mason Plumlee that was finishing out that game instead of Zubac. So
Yeah,
so
and
it
Mason
seems like
Plumlee,
they like that.
obviously is a very
Yeah.
unqualified defensive player on
Right.
the
Yeah.
interior. Very talented offensively. Don't want to take anything away from that, but not a good defender whatsoever.
Hmm.
So I would wonder kind of if they like if if Sabonis' mobility and kind of that side to side action they run is too much for Zubats, they go small, and then Sabonis can just punish them.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of been one of my favorite things about the Kings this year is when a defense they shut down the Sabonis, they shut down the Fox DHO, and then like Keegan tries to lift for an open angle three, and like they shut down that too, and all these outlets are shut off, and Sabonis goes, okay, I'll just go one on one against your
1-on-1,
center,
no problem. Yeah.
and then I'll score. That's like, ah, geez, like what the hell are you supposed to do with that? Like their last resort is this accomplished 20 points per game scorer who's on like 65% true shooting. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And then like I think similarly, like I don't like the off ball awareness and crispness of the Clippers defenders. I think
Hmm.
both the communication and the general awareness of individual defenders is not particularly good. Um, I think Kawhi is good there. Batum was good. Like I think they've excised more from the rotation.
Yeah.
But I just worry about Powell's not good there, and they need his offense a lot. Russ, I think, has been better in some regards defensively with the Clippers, but like he's still pretty prone to getting like caught up on a flare screen or a back screen, things like that. Or he loves to go for kind of the poke out, like die on the screen and then try and poke
Hmm.
it out from
Hmm.
behind. So those are some of the reasons I like that for them. And then, like I said, the defense, like I think even the Clippers could have an awesome shot making series. I don't know if they would be able to put these Kings into scramble mode as much as would be ideal, because of their lack of rim pressure and things like that. So that would be my most favorite matchup for the Kings, and I would definitely pick the Kings in that matchup. I'm
Yeah.
low on the Clippers. I think I've made that pretty clear.
Yeah.
And obviously, I think anyone would be low on the Clippers without PG, but I'm low, even if PG's back to his All NBA or All Star self. So
They
for those
really
reasons, I think.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. They've really been a wholly inconsistent team, and the offense has just at times, like you said, it grinds to a halt. It just feels like there's not a lot of ball movement there. And I know they've brought Russell Westbrook in, and Westbrook has looked good for them. But I just think there's this level of fluidness that they just do not have offensively, and I question that not only against Sacramento, but I question that against Phoenix. I question that against Golden State, whoever they end up facing in the first round.
It's a lot of slow decision makers is the big issue there,
Yeah.
and like I wrote a piece about them maybe a month ago on Dime. If people want to read it, I'm sure if you just type my name with Dime Up Rocks and
Plug
Clippers,
talk. Sorry. Yeah.
you'll find it. But like I wrote a lot about the fact that they kind of have to always make concession on one side of the ball, and you have to do that with any team, and with
Hmm.
any player for the most part. Like I said, besides the rare Giannis and Joels and Kawhis and Tatum's and and KD and whatnot.
Yeah.
Um, and that's why those guys are all top 10 players or wherever you want to put Kawhi and KD with their injuries and but at their peak still these days. Like they just like Norm Powell, really really good, super decisive, gives you rim pressure, gives you floor spacing, gives you quick hitting movements, but undersized two guard. Can do some stuff. He's kind of an off ball top lock guy because he's physical, but like just not much else there. Russ, like you mentioned, pretty poor in defense, gives you the rim pressure and the playmaking they need, and gets them into the open floor more. They're a super slow paced team before
Yeah.
Kawhi got or before Russ got there, and they're up to like 22nd, 23rd in pace, which isn't high, but have to go check the splits. I'd imagine they're probably top 10, top 12 since Russ arrived. Zubac versus Plumlee is a great example of that too. Zubac just kind of eats up space offensively in a bad way, but on defense eats up space in a very good way. Even if he's improved a lot on offense, has a nice little soft hook shot that he's added to his repertoire as of late. So
Hmm.
just too many concessions on both sides of the ball um, for me. But yeah, I would like that matchup for the Kings for sure. I think that's one that I would feel comfortable with and feel confident in. Um, Barring Kawhi and PG have two ridiculous shot making series, which obviously is not out of the realm of possibility because those
Nope.
guys are two
Yeah.
tremendous players, and Kawhi has made a habit of it. Obviously, as you and other Raptors fans know, he's done that before. So, um, but obviously,
Even
that
man, even
Raptors team was had a lot more quick decision makers around
yeah,
Kawhi that helped things.
definitely no
So
Marc Gasol on this
yeah,
Clippers team.
No Kyle Lowry to make
Yeah,
this week. No Pascal Siakam as well.
yeah.
But yeah, so I wouldn't be surprised if the Clippers won, but I'd definitely pick the Kings in that series with or without PG
Yeah.
available.
It'd be awesome. It would be. I mean, just as a NBA fan, it would be great to see the Kings win a playoff series. I mean, it would be a great sight to see, especially for the city of Sacramento. That's amazing. You sort of mentioned the Clippers. This is a team that they are more than likely going to face in the first round, and that's the Phoenix Suns. Obviously, the upside with the Suns is very clear, very abundantly clear. With Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, CP, Aiton. Some would say they're the favorites in the West. I'm not necessarily sure. They've been undefeated with Durant in the lineup. What have been your overall takeaways watching this team fully healthy? How have you? Has it alleviated any concern for you? Has it created any concern for you watching this team? What are some overlying, questions or even answers that you have when it comes to this Suns team?
Yeah, so I do want to preface that I've only seen, I want to say maybe 2 or 3 games of them healthy,
Fair.
just because they haven't been very healthy, and it's like I can't watch every game. It's on
It's
my
few and
agenda to do
far
between now and
between.
they
Yeah.
start.
Yeah.
Before the start of the playoffs, obviously I still have another week or so, so definitely gonna catch a few Suns games with Katie in the lineup. But I like how they're not overextending Katie offensively. I think there's a very seamless fit. He runs a lot of the same offense and actions that they ran for Mikal and they still run for Booker.
Yeah.
I like how they're getting into his spots on that end. I like that they're like they've used. I know that David Nash, I think, is his name, who does really good work just on Twitter covering the Suns. That's kind of like the big play they run a lot is like the CP8 and pick and roll, and KD is in the weak corner. I think maybe I don't know if he still is, but maybe at one point I think I saw he hadn't missed a corner three off of that action yet, and he's
Hmm.
a release valve there. So I like that they're not kind of overextending him there, but I like at the same time how they continue to kind of let him be an initiator when necessary, help him get the ball to CP on the move. That's been a big difference I've noticed. This year is CP starting off the ball a lot, getting the ball with the head of steam, with
Yeah.
an advantage, going to compensate for his lack of burst these days, where he can still kind of use instantaneous playmaking speed and whatnot and processing without having to do all the work up top. So those are some of the things I've liked. Like it just seems like a really seamless fit offensively. Defensively, you can still kind of tell they're working out the kinks. I've watched a couple games where the switches are late, the communications late, maybe, which is just natural. Like it's really hard to get that stuff on the fly.
Yeah.
You just like people call switches different ways. Whether it's a hand motion or it's calling it out specifically. Verbally or vocally. Geez, same thing. But that's kind of what stood out to me there. And so, and the other encouraging thing too is CP's been really good since around the start of the month. Last 16 games, averaging about 14 a game, 9 assists, 47% from the field, 36% from three. Still not getting to the free throw line much, but that's not really been his
Yeah.
MO the last few years.
Yeah.
Only 1.6 turnovers, so about 5.5 to 1 assist to turnover ratio. Um, I have my fair share of concerns about CP in the playoffs, but it
As we
is
all do.
encouraging
Yeah.
to see him the last month kind of ramp it up. The mid-range jumper hadn't really been there for him this year, kind of uncharacteristic. It's really weird to say that about CP, but
Yeah.
it is encouraging for him to kind of get back there because he shot the ball really well from three this year, but he couldn't score from mid-range, and it was like, this is a weird reality we're in. But I feel like he's dialing it up a little bit. Like I said, I like that they're helping him out a little bit, making him do everything. So I think part of the reason that he faltered in the last two series they lost the playoffs is because of the full court pressure that a Drew Holiday, Reggie Bullock, or Frank Ntilikina applied. Whereas
Yeah.
now you can do it with KD, you can do it with Booker, and then you can get CP on the move with those handoff actions with KD or Aiton, whoever it is. So I feel definitely encouraged by the Suns in some regards, but they're on my watch list for sure over the next week, just because it's been hard to catch a lot of them because I'm trying to catch all these different West teams and all these different Eastern Conference playing
Crazy,
teams, and
man. Yeah.
I can't find the time to watch 4 Suns games in a row because then I'll miss
Yeah.
27 other teams, and it's a tough reality. But yeah, they're on my watch list for sure, so I can get a better sense of the KD new look Suns over the next week.
I think like you, the Suns are also trying to figure out how they can watch, because I mean, look, like you mentioned it with the defense, but the learning on the fly approach is really what they've taken so far. And I think one of the observations I've had, again, just like you, I haven't really watched. I've maybe watched 2 or 3 full Suns games when they've been fully healthy, but my main takeaway from that is that teams are very comfortable loading up on KD and Booker and then forcing essentially just saying anybody else but those two, we will deal with the consequences, whether it's Josh Okogie, whether it's, whoever else they throw out as that fifth guy, maybe even CP3 and Aiton, forcing those guys to make more shots. I'm a big believer that like your supporting cast has to show up in the playoffs for you to win playoff games. I know a lot of people say that superstars are what will win you playoff series, and maybe that is the case when it comes to shot making and overall clutch shots, whatever have you. But the end of third quarter run when Grant Williams is knocking down a bunch of threes, it's those type of things that really make the difference between a conference semifinals run and a finals run. Um, with that being said, how do you think the Suns could potentially counteract that with them loading up on KD, maybe loading up on Booker? What are some ways do you think they can counteract that?
Yeah, I think the big thing, when they have their big four out there is like if teams are going to double one of KD or Booker, like you just being diligent about like involving them in a lot of screen actions. Like let's say,
Yeah.
um, I'm trying to think of, the Suns run a lot of stuff from out of horns, out of the elbows, a lot of Chicago action pin downs. Let's say like they're going to double KD off the catch, you have and like in whatever this, let's say it's like they're just coming around a pin down, they're gonna double off that. Let's have Aiton be the screener so you can slip it, and then Booker or CP finds him. If it's a flare screen or something like that, have Booker be the screener so you can flare out if they're not going to guard him. So things like that, and then also the reality is that like part of what makes KD really, really, really freaking good is he's often impervious to double teams and all this pressure. Like, I was watching I think maybe the last Suns game I caught in full was the Wolves one last week in his return, and I know he didn't shoot the ball well, but like Jaden McDaniels played some really good defense, but he would hit some ridiculous. KD would still hit some ridiculous shots when Jaden did everything right. Like, that's kind of his mo, right? Is that
Yeah.
is that he's just kind of impervious to these things. So,
Same with Booker,
um,
honestly. Same with
yeah,
Booker.
yeah, Booker
Yeah.
can be the same way for sure, especially against single coverage, even if this defender's really stingy. So, that alleviates some concerns for sure as well. But that I would just be really intentional about kind of how you're kind of harmonizing the talents of those four,
Yeah.
and just kind of who's being used as a screener and things like that. Um, but yeah, there's definitely some concern because of the fact that like I don't know what CP will look like in the playoffs. Honestly, I don't know what Aiton looks like game to game. He's been really mercurial this year.
Yeah.
He's a huge swing factor for them this year. If they can get the 2021 playoff Aiton that we saw, and kind of maybe even just
Yeah.
the one we saw down the stretch of the regular season, the last half of the year when he really kind of broke out in full, that would be huge. Even the one we saw for the first 8 or 9 games of the playoffs last year when he was pretty dang good,
Yeah.
um, would be great. So, and then it doesn't even mention that like Torrey Craig slash Josh Okogie is probably their fifth guy, and I know Okogie had a nice little run there, but he's fallen back to earth as a shooter. Does some good stuff as a slasher. I really like the defense. There's some good connective passing there as well. But the fact that kind of their fifth starter is more of like a guy that you prefer as a seventh or eighth man, like end of the playoff rotation, but
Hmm.
you're going to have to probably close with one of them. It is concerning for sure. Curious to see how Monty handles those things. He's definitely been very experimental this year with the lineups. I
Yeah.
think as a whole, the Suns have tried to be more experimental. They did some of that last year, but I think they've kicked it up a notch this year as well because obviously they weren't experimental enough in the regular season as they cruised to whatever it was, 60 wins. I think it might have been a franchise record or some really nice shiny record. Um, but and yeah, I came off really demeaning, but I meant it
No,
as like
I
they
got
had
what
they
you
had a
mean.
great they had a great they had a great regular season. I just didn't I didn't mean it for that to belittle the Suns in the regular season. There's clearly value in the regular season. I believe that, but yeah. So that's kind of where I stand on those things. It's like, so I think the big thing is just being intentional with how you're involving those guys. Katie and Booker like the ball in some similar spots. Like the ball, you get the ball off of similar actions. So
Hmm.
if they're gonna load up on one of them, have the other guy be involved in the screen. You still got CP up top to survey everything. Incredible processor.
Yeah.
And let him capitalize on that. Teams are going to sell out. Obviously, it gets harder if you're staggering one of. I think obviously any time you're going to want one of Booker or Katie on the floor just for shot creation and shot making. So that's when things get hazier. I don't quite have the answers there necessarily, but I think in that sense, then you're going to want a Cameron Payne out there, or the other CP, Chris Paul out there. But it was funny, like when they still had Cameron Johnson, like I would have Chris Paul in my notes as CP, I would have Cam Payne as Payne, and I would have Cam Johnson
Cam
as Cam,
Johnson,
and it was like
Cam.
it was a mess at times. But yeah, so I think that'd be the big thing, is just being dealing with rotations otherwise. Like, you imagine you're
Right.
going to run a 7-8 man rotation at most deep into the playoffs, assume that's where the Suns can reach. So that's kind of the big thing, is just diligence
Yeah.
as a broad theme there.
By proxy here, through touching the first four teams, the top four teams in the West, we've sort of touched on who the Suns could potentially face in the first round. We've talked about the Clippers. We've talked a little bit about the Lakers. I do want to talk about the Golden State Warriors. They're going to be getting Andrew Wiggins back. He's out for the regular season, but that's only 2 more games. More than likely, he will be playing in their first round series. They could be the 5th seed that faces the Suns. They could be the 6th seed that faces the Kings. They could be the 7th seed that ends up playing the Warriors. And look, if things go really, really bad, they could even be the 8th seed playing the Nuggets. But at the same time, I look, there's a lot of possibilities with this Warriors team. They've struggled on the road in a somewhat perplexing fashion. They've been unbeatable at home as usual. In general, bringing back Wiggins should solve some of their problems, but do you think that is enough to bring them back to that contender status? Do you think that bringing Wiggins back is a sort of all-in-one problem solver, if you will, for this team and what they've kind of dealt with throughout the season?
Yeah, it's weird because like I wish I was able to watch like every Warriors game so I could clearly understand I know like what exactly the what causes the distance between the home and the road. I know some of it's been like 3-point shooting defense, 3-point shooting
Yeah,
luck, I think is what some beat reports have put out there. But like, and maybe I missed an article on this, but I love like Joe Verre, who does incredible work on the Warriors, like had done.
absolutely.
Maybe like I said, maybe I missed it. So Joe, if you listen to this, feel free to DM me and give me an earful, or at least plug the link. Because what's causing that? Because like when I catch them at their best, they just look really, really good,
Yeah,
which is not rocket science. They're not breaking any ground, but I think Wiggins solves a lot of issues because they're playing a lot of small lineups still. They had a pretty weird juggernaut lineup against the Thunder on Tuesday, where it was like Draymond plus Steph, Poole, DiVincenzo, and Gary Payton II. That's a lot of small guys.
mm-hmm.
They didn't close with it. I think they brought Looney back in place of, I want to say GP2, maybe it could be off, but Wiggins gives you that kind of that a lot of the traits of everything to an extent. Like with Kuminga, they like the point of attack defense slash size combo, the rim pressure off the ball, some of the offensive rebounding. But it doesn't give you that floor space or shot creation. You get that with Wiggins. With Peyton, they like the rim pressure off the ball, some of the rebounding, the point of attack. You don't get that floor spacing again. He's also much smaller than Kuminga.
Right.
Obviously, a much better defender than Kuminga, but kind of that same idea. With Wiggins, you get all the best of those things. So if Wiggins is able to quickly round into form, which is obviously unfair to him to put all this pressure on
Tough to
him
ask. Yeah,
as the elixir, and especially kind of just getting his feet under him so quickly. I know that I think Bob Myers said that he'd been training, but it's just different. Like it
yeah,
just is, and he knows that. Wiggins knows that. It's not anything groundbreaking there, but um, if he can play the way he did open this year and the way he did in the playoffs last year and for much of the regular season as well, like that player is huge for them. It gives them more wing depth, gives them more rebounding, gives them rim pressure with his cutting, gives them floor spacing, tertiary shot creation behind
yeah.
Steph and Poole. Maybe even secondary if Poole's having a tough decision making night, and maybe the defense isn't there either. So he definitely alleviates a lot of problems. Like, that's a really, really incredible front court in terms of mobility, ground coverage, defensively with Looney, Dre, and Wiggins. Maybe even just Dre and Wiggins. And you go
Mm-hmm.
3 small guards. Maybe you go Clay as well. Clay has been quite impressive at the turn of the calendar in 2023.
Yeah,
And I think he's gotten a little more mobile too. I think just maybe putting him in the proper matchups too, I think has helped. He's just the fluidity laterally is not there like it was pre-injury or pre-injuries, I should say. But you can definitely see, like we saw later in the finals last year, that there's certain matchups where he can be really stingy, on the ball still.
mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, I think Wiggins at his peak form that we've seen during his Golden State tenure alleviates a lot of issues. Um, But the issue, but like I said, it just I just wish I had a better understanding of why they've struggled on the road versus the home versus home. But maybe that's kind of an assignment for me. Once we get some of these fewer games, once the plan starts
Yeah.
next week.
You've
But
got
yeah, I still.
homework.
Yeah, I do. I give myself why did I do that? But yeah, so that's kind of where I stand on them. I feel good about the Warriors. I do. Like I don't know. Again, maybe it's just I'm giving them too much credit for their highs and kind of their championship mystique. But I just think there's a lot of stuff they can do on both ends,
Yeah.
and Steph is so like floor raising offensively that it allows for a lot of defensively slanted lineups. But I like what DiVincenzo's done this year. I like what GPT has looked like since he's been back. Poole is such a mercurial player, if we're going to call it that, which is fair to call Poole that as well. But
Yeah.
gosh, when you get a run like you saw him with against the Thunder to kind of turn that game in the fourth quarter,
Yeah.
you see some of the stuff he's done in the late, like his playoff run last year is really impressive too for a guy that young in his first deep playoff run,
Hmm.
or his first playoff run, right? Because I don't
Yeah.
think they
No,
made the
that's
play.
that's their first playoff win.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I know they made the play-in the year prior, but that's not the playoffs.
Yeah.
So yeah, I still like them, but I'm definitely willing to come down from that if people have seen more of their or have people have been able to better pinpoint their road struggles and kind of the factors behind it that I'm potentially overlooking.
I've decided I'm not going to doubt the Golden State Warriors. And the reason is I made that same mistake with the San Antonio Spurs when I was a kid. I kept saying there's no way. They're way too old. They're the 6 seed, they're the 5 seed, whatever. They're not going to do it this year. It doesn't matter. And yet still somehow they year in, year out, they had this resiliency about them. And even though they were a great regular season team for a bunch of years, they still found a way to turn it up in the playoffs. And I think when you have the playoff experience of a Klay Thompson, of a Steph Curry, of a Draymond Green, who has been, I mean, even in that Thunder game was just a
He
world beater defensively.
he
Um,
was incredible on both ends for like I don't know he
yeah,
didn't score a ton, but God, just the decisions he made. God, I mean,
yeah,
that's my favorite. I think maybe this is gonna sound really nerdy of me, but gosh, when he is on, like he's still one of my favorite players to watch. Like some of the stuff he did
yeah.
in that Thunder game, and then just thinking back to some of the stuff we did in games 5 and 6 of the finals, like it's just another level. It's super fun. But yeah, I
It's
think that's completely fair to just trust them.
Yeah, I mean, look, and to your point about Draymond, there's a level of intuition with the way that he plays, with the way that Steph plays, that is different from saying, "Hey, this is just a regular basketball team that is going through the lulls of a road trip or whatever." Right? I would like to know if there. I mean, Joe, if you got a answer for us, let us know. But in general, I would like to know if there's anything that really catches people's eye when it comes to these road struggles for the Warriors, because otherwise, I do think they're a contender. And like, it's crazy to say this about a team who is battling to stay in the playoffs, but they have the chance to win an NBA championship this year. And I think that's not a crazy thing to suggest.
The big thing, just kind of looking at some of their profile, thinking back to some games too, is like they turn the ball. I think they're 29th in turnover
Insane.
rate,
Yeah.
and that's a product of both Steph and Dre, right? Like
Hmm.
Steph has kind of historically always been a very talented and pretty good passer, but he's sloppy. Dre will test the margins as much as possible. A lot of his
Yeah.
turnovers are dead ball turnovers, so they're not as as detrimental because they don't ignite a fast break, but they still end up possession a chance for you to score. That's any turnover, is
Yeah.
gonna hurt you in that regard. But Poole obviously has his own issue. I don't know if Poole's turnover rate is
They've
huge this
typically
year.
been a pretty high turnover team year in, year
Yeah,
out,
and,
though,
and
right? Yeah.
that's the reality of an offense that's so motion based, so movement based. You're trying
Hmm.
a lot of different passes, and like I said, you're led by Steph and Dre for a decade, just kind of
Yeah.
going to be the way it is. But yeah, that would be a big concern. Is like even like because like you think like who like if they played Memphis in the first round, Memphis is really good at turning teams over. I don't know if they're as good as they were last when they had Melton and Kyle Anderson still, but that's a strength of that defense. They play aggressive help with the nail. They're handsy with Dylan Brooks and Jaren's obviously both a block machine and pretty good at uh, what's the word I guess producing steals for a big man too. So that would be a series that obviously, just even for the encore stuff, the co-curriculars people would love.
Right.
But
Yeah.
I think that would be an interesting series. Like if Golden State runs into a team that's really good at turning you over, um, and then maybe matches up with Golden State's defense well. Maybe they're a great rebounding team, or they have a bunch of size inside.
Hmm.
Which I don't think there are a ton of teams that have that really in in the West that they could match up with. Like you think about Minnesota, but like Minnesota has own issues, and they're not going to play Minnesota in the first round, obviously. So
I kind of
yeah,
want to
but the
pull
tournament
on.
was.
I kind of want to pull on the thread you just mentioned. You sort of talked about it, but like this matchup dependency in the West is something that is so obvious to me, and maybe it's because there's this very clear logjam that's happening from honestly throughout the entire conference. You don't really see that in the East. I think in the East, it's Milwaukee and Boston. They're cut above. Philly is obviously, it seems very very formidable this year. So there's, even if the matchup is tough for them, you think those teams will be able to best whoever they face in the playoffs. But when it comes to the West, there's a level of matchup dependency that would make me say, hey, you know what? I think the Warriors, who are a 6 or 7 seed, could potentially upset the Grizzlies in the first round, or whoever in the first round, the Kings in the first round. You could say the same thing about the Lakers, who we talked about earlier, and how they've looked like a much better team than what their seed is, but at the same time they can pull off an upset as well. Maybe the Clippers are in that same area. I guess my question with that is, why do you think that is in the West? Do you think it's because a lot of these teams are closer together, or do you think it's a certain element of all of these teams have flaws and therefore it's matchup dependent? Where do you think that comes from?
I think it's the latter there. These teams are flawed. These teams have dealt with a lot of different injuries and looking different throughout the year, or adding players.
Yeah.
You can basically, the Grizzlies plus like everyone else, below them besides the Kings, have had pretty substantial injury issues this year. Maybe I'm forgetting some stuff with the Kings or Nuggets, so I apologize if so. But or just absences. You look at Jared, Desmond Bain have all missed, I think, 20 plus games. Steven
Yeah.
Adams 40 plus games, something like that. The Suns, Katie's been out of the lineup. Booker's missed time. Aiton's missed time. CP, I think, has missed some time. I could be
He's
off.
missed some time as well. Yeah.
It's a long season. Just some of these early season injuries, you forget about them by January, February.
Yeah.
But then the Warriors have had their issues, of course. The Wolves, the Pelicans, obviously. The Thunder, I know that he doesn't play, but like, he wouldn't impact them from like a game to game standpoint. But like, obviously, Chet Holmgren is not playing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and then the Clippers, obviously, Kawhi has missed some time. PG is missing time now, and sometime early in the year too. So like, I just think the West is a clearly flawed conference. Not to say that teams in the East haven't had injuries. Especially up top, there's been guys, Middleton, Maxey, Harden, Rob Williams.
Yeah.
Um, have all missed substantial time. So. Um, yeah, I think it's just that this is a flawed conference, and um, I think it's a team adapting they're constantly having to adapt, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of guys in and out of the lineup, or new trades happen.
Yeah.
So that would be kind of my thing. It's just teams have had a lot of different issues to deal with, and maybe you compare it to the East a little bit, where like, even if Rob Williams missed a lot of time, Boston's accustomed to playing without him. Middleton's missed some time. I know he's been out and out of lineup, but like, they figure out a way to adapt to that. Harden and Maxey missed kind of time coinciding for the most part. Besides those 20 games they missed, roughly, Philadelphia's had them in the lineup, so it hasn't been
Right.
necessarily the same as where like Kawhi and PG are out, like Jaws is out of the lineup. KD's out of the lineup. Booker's
Yeah.
missing time. Like, Booker had the hamstring thing where like he was in, then he was out, he's back in. Um, the Wolves are constantly having to adapt because they have the trades, to get Conley, and Ant was kind of, I guess, evolving on the fly as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it just feels like maybe the absences are different. And there's a lot of flawed teams that's kind of requiring, these players and coaches and whatnot to kind of constantly remold and reshape how they play stylistically on both ends on a game to game basis.
Maybe that bodes well for the playoffs. I mean, being able to adapt on the fly is sort of something that you need when it comes to postseason basketball. I mean, you
Well, as
mentioned
long
it
as
at
you
the
have
top.
like a watering hole identity, right? Like, I
Right.
think, you have to be like, that's where I think, if you're trying to say like what makes the Warriors, to me, why am I more optimistic about them than the Clippers or maybe the Wolves? Like, the Warriors know who they are,
Mm-hmm.
and like, they know what they want to do on both ends. They know what kind of players they want to put out there for the most part. Um, aside from maybe some of the random line decisions that Steve Kerr will make in the first half and then
Right.
decide to go elsewhere in the second half, but like, they have an identity, right? They're gonna switch a lot of stuff. They're gonna play drop with Looney. They're gonna run the off ball movement offensively. Dre's gonna be the conductor. Steph, when they have to, they'll run more pick and roll with him and let him cook.
Mm-hmm.
They just know who they are. Whereas the Wolves, I don't know if they've ever gotten there. The Clippers, I think, kind of know who they want to be, but can't really get there often.
Yeah.
And maybe you could say the same with the Warriors because they're standing kind of the exact same record, but I just feel better about the Warriors getting to where they want to be constantly than a lot of these other teams in the play-in or playoff hunt.
Who then do you say is the favorite to come out of the Western Conference? Because we've mentioned a bunch of teams now, and I apologize for not doing a deep dive on the Pelicans and Wolves and the Mavericks. But at the same time, I don't think those are the teams that are going to be the favorites to come out of the West. So I guess the question I would have here is who do you think it's going to? Yeah,
Uh, I will say I do just want to give them a shout out on our outline. You had some kind of what you're curious about each of these playoff teams
absolutely.
doing.
Do
With
it
the
up. Do it
Pelicans,
up.
I'd be curious to kind of see can Trey Murphy continue his interior strides, become a much better scorer and driver inside the arc. Can that continue? Didn't make a single 2-pointer in the playoffs last year.
Yeah.
Kind of similar with the Wolves. What does Jaden McDaniels look like on both ends? He's looked better at times this year on offense, a little more confident, a little tighter handle, better connective passing. What does Ant look like in terms of his processing on both ends? I thought he played well last year's playoffs, but was a little didn't love the decision making. I think he's gotten better in that regard.
Absolutely. Yeah.
With the Mavs, like how far can the explosive Luka Kyrie duo override every other flaw that roster has?
Mm-hmm.
If they're able to get there, and then with Thunder, Josh Giddey and Jada, what do they look like as complementary initiators? Kind of how does that OKC small ball approach fare?
Right.
Be kind of the things I'd look for if any of those teams make the playoffs. But as for I have coming out of the West, I still go Denver. Like I don't love that pick, especially don't love it to where I felt a month ago.
Mm-hmm.
When I think they were like 44 and 16 or 18 or something like that.
Yeah.
Maybe 44 and 20. I don't know exactly, but definitely a better record than seven. Like what happens after a 7-8 stretch. But then like I saw and then just kind of when I saw that question, I didn't know if he necessarily meant just in the West or in kind of in all of it. So I went Boston, Denver in my final prediction right now, and then I think I had Denver, Golden State, and Boston, Milwaukee as my finalist.
As the West, yeah, and East.
West versus East, so that final four there. But again, like it's just
interesting. So
matchup based, and I will say I did that based off of who is currently in there, who is in the
right.
seeding.
Yeah.
Obviously the Warriors could fall, they could rise, they could change things, but I think the Warriors are 6 right now, and I like them in a matchup against the Kings. I just like the way that Steph could play against that coverage, dragging a lot of 4-on-3s. I like the way the Warriors off-ball defenders could play against some of the off-ball offense of the Kings. So that's why I have the Warriors.
That would be a fascinating offensive team.
Yeah. So that's where I'm at. But again, it's a tenuous pick for sure. I'm not trying to hedge or anything, but like I just don't know because like I would love to be more confident in Denver. They've got a superstar. They've got a really good offense, but like 15 games ago they look great, and now they don't look that good. And like it's not 6 games, it's not 4 games where like they kind of have it already locked up. It's a third. It's not a third. It's like 20% of the year, 18% of the year. That's a large enough sample for me to go. Like I don't know.
Makes you wonder.
So yeah, Denver for sure. Still not for sure. Denver's still there. But I think kind of my top 3 would be Denver, Golden State, and LA, or the Lakers, excuse me. It's tough to see 2 lower seeds like that making a deep run.
Yeah.
But I just kind of like the roster composition of them, both of them. I like kind of the versatility that Lakers have added, the different ways they can play. They've got perimeter scoring, floor space, and they've got AD and LeBron. I feel better about the Lakers now with LeBron kind of, I wouldn't say rounding the form after just 2 games, but kind of the way he took over in that second half to kind of help the Lakers make that a competitive game was super impressive in the second half of a back-to-back after an overtime at altitude. Because frankly, he didn't look very good on Friday against the Wolves and kind of hadn't looked particularly good since he came back. So those back-to-back 30-point outings are important. Anthony Davis has looked phenomenal basically all year when he's been available. Austin Reeves is very good. D'Lo, I like what he's brought as a passer. I like kind of the wing depth they have with some of the ground covers they have defensively. So not me trying to just do like Lakers hype necessarily, but I just like what they have. And but yeah, it's one of these years where I think Denver's going to be. I think at least one of those 3 teams will be in the conference finals. I feel most confident in Denver, but I wouldn't be surprised if any of the 8 or 9 or 10 teams still fighting. I guess 11 teams still fighting. Right. I guess I would be surprised if maybe the 4 play-in teams, or the final 3 play-in teams, plus the Mavs if they made it. But it was maybe somehow the Pelicans turned on and Zion is back and they look like they did for the first 2 months. But
curious because you didn't
top
mention
6 or 7 look pretty solid.
I'm curious because in the top 3 you didn't mention Phoenix, and I feel like most people would probably mention them as one of their top 3 in the West.
I'm just not there with Phoenix. And that's a good point. I kind of I guess maybe internally I was like, I'm not there, so I won't include them. But they're the four. They're going to play Denver. I just think Denver's a better team. I just worry that like they don't have enough players. Like
Right.
I don't
Yeah.
know if they have a fifth starter. I don't know what CP's gonna look. I know that like the Denver isn't like the most explosive defense. Um, but like I just like if you throw Bruce Brown on a Christian Brown, like I think Christian Brown. I know he can't play it that much necessarily, but like Christian Brown, you get the combination of Bruce Brown, Christian Brown, KCP pressuring CP full court.
Christian
You
Brown
get
should probably play more in the playoffs, by the way.
yeah, like I don't know, like maybe a like kind of maybe staggers minutes
Yeah.
against KCPs. Different players, of course, but both have that kind of that shooting guard size, to fill
Hmm.
a defensive minded role. Obviously, KCP is a much better and more accomplished shooter
Yeah.
with his own championship pedigree. Um, so I just worry about that. Like I don't know what CP looks like deep in the playoffs. I don't know what eight looks like on a night to night, possession by possession basis.
Yeah.
And then that fifth starter really worries me. Like I think you can. It's very tough, but you can get away with having five starters and then have a pretty crummy bench. But they have like four starters, and I don't know if I trust two of them.
Yeah.
I know CP's look better. I'm a guy who's trying to really support Aiden because I like the growth he's made throughout his career, the way he's adapted. But like, it's hard to trust him going into these playoffs. Like
Hmm.
I feel a lot different about him than I did a year ago, and especially 2 years ago, just going into a playoff series based on the way he's played
Yeah.
right there. Maybe that changes. I did preface that like I need to get a better feel for these KD-led Suns. So take anything I say about them with a grain of salt for sure. Take anything I say in general with a grain of salt. I can only watch so much of all these teams. But yeah, I just think like if you only have three and a half, four guys you can trust, like it's really,
It's
really
tough.
hard. And I
Yeah.
think I think it goes kind of back to what I was saying earlier, where like Denver knows who they are, knows who they want to be. They've got five guys they can play for sure. Um, I know like people are gonna go back to MPJ getting hunted mercilessly in that Nugget series,
Yeah.
or that Sun series 2 years ago. But also, I think I think he's learned from that series. I think he's in a better place physically for sure too. Like he was not right. He was not himself by that Sun series. Those back issues bled into the regular season, and then he missed most of last year. So I just think they've got five guys you can trust, and I don't feel the same way as I do about the Suns, but
Yeah.
that could be rendered irrelevant with KD um, and Booker doing
And
their shot
Booker. Yeah.
making thing, and maybe Ayton goes back to the way he was able to kind of really give Jokic some issues on both ends in that series 2 years ago. But these are two different teams too. Like I don't want
Hmm.
to overemphasize that series at all, but definitely stuff to take away from it still.
It's hard also to galvanize in the short amount of time that they are asking this team to galvanize in. And with KD's injury, it actually makes it even harder for them to figure things out, learning on the fly in the playoffs in the postseason when one of their matchups might be the Warriors or might be the Clippers or might be the Lakers. It just leaves more room for them to be exploited in a 7-game series. I think the Suns, I sort of agree with you. I think the Suns are a team for next year when they have a summer to figure things out, when they have a summer to grab a couple of veterans at the vet min and be able to stockpile their depth a little bit more. They seem like a team that's prepped to be a 50 plus win team next season. Whereas this season there are some questions and like how are you going to be able to in a short amount of time turn into a championship contender? It would be insane to see,
Yeah,
but
and I think it's similar, right? Where I think this Suns team ceiling is definitely higher than last year's Sixers, but it's a similar thing, right? Where they were trying to learn on the fly after getting
right,
Harden.
yeah,
And we were talking a little bit, before we started recording, but like when I talked with Tyrese Maxey a few weeks ago, like I just kind of asked him what's different. You have a lot of the same players as last year, and kind of why does his offense look so elite? Why is the crunch time execution so great? And like basically, it's just like we know exactly what we want to do, and like
mm,
that last year we kind of learned on the fly. And I just kind of worry that the Suns are going to get into some of these pressurized moments they won't quite know. It's not a fault. It's really tough to, as I
right,
said, galvanize and kind of know exactly what you want to do when you had so little time. But like that's the reality of these things is like you have to know what you want to do.
yeah,
And yeah, maybe they know what they want to do because it's as simple as let's give Katie a mid post ISO and that'll work. And that could definitely render this entire spiel irrelevant. But you gotta know and you gotta know what you want to do on defense too. Like you gotta know like where do you want Katie? Do you want to be in a point of attack guy? Do you want to be in your low man? Like where exactly do you need him? So
right.
I tend to agree that they're kind of a next year team, but I would by no means be surprised if they're in the finals, the conference finals. Giving Denver a run for its money at the worst in the second round if they meet there. But yeah, I think that's kind of maybe the next 2 or 3 years, or as long as kind of CP continue to be this kind of third guy.
Right.
It also depends too, like, I don't want to speculate, but like, the Aiton thing, kind of, like, are they going to end up, could he be dealt this summer? Things like that. Like, how much do they trust him? And I think a lot of that will depend on how he approaches the playoffs and how he looks in the playoffs, to kind of his future. But yeah,
Yeah.
I'm on your line of thinking that maybe more of a next year thing. The Sixers have been a this year thing.
Absolutely.
Obviously, a long way to go for them to accomplish anything they want, but they've certainly looked better with Harden in the fold than they did last year, and he looked better. So
it's
yeah,
funny.
I think that's
It's really funny that you mentioned what's different and asking Tyrese Maxey what's different, because literally today I had dropped something for SDPN saying, are the Sixers different enough this year? And I mean, my question was sort of a maybe, sort of yes, and we'll see what happens in the playoffs with them. Very excited to see how this team looks. I mean, right now they are currently down big to the Miami Heat, but that's okay. Neither here nor there.
They have nothing to play for.
Yes, exactly. It's all done.
Yeah.
Jackson, man, you do incredible work. I mentioned the Quentin Grimes feature off the top, but again, I'll mention it again. It really is phenomenal work that you do. Is there anything else that you want to plug? Anything that you've got going on right now that you want to just throw out to the audience listening?
I wrote a piece on SB Nation about Corey Kispert, not related at all to the playoffs. But he's having a nice year in Washington,
Nice.
Despite kind of their own unfortunate vibes and season. But really nice player that I think is going to grow into a really good role player for a long time. Rest of them in on the analyst this week too on Trey Murphy, kind of his growth and how he's helped the Pelicans stay afloat. Despite some absences from Zion and Brandon Ingram.
Yeah.
Wednesday I had 3 things published on Wednesday, and I'm kind of trying to like save them so I don't overflow people at the same time with 3 different articles.
Very nice.
That's what I got going. I'm gonna have something on manual quickly, maybe this weekend as well.
Cool.
So he's having a great year. So I guess it's like a next week for me, but
Yeah.
having a great year. Don't really care about what the 6-man starter debates, but just a really good basketball player. Young basketball player is going to get paid a lot of money, and rightfully so, this offseason.
Really cool story too. Really, really cool story. The way, Fred Katz has kind of mentioned it. I've listened to the Knicks pods a lot, but there's a lot of cool background to Quickly's, story to get to this level.
Jake Fisher of Yahoo Sports wrote a cool profile on him about a couple weeks ago. So if you want a little more in-depth profile, but yeah, if you're subscribed to The Athletic, just hotkey like Fred Katz. I may know Quickly. It's done a few different really cool things on Quickly. And just honestly, like if you like the Knicks, you like good writing, just read all of Fred's work. He's done a really good job on that beat.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Jackson, man, I appreciate you. Thank you so much for joining us, and appreciate everybody else who's listened to the Objective Basketball Podcast. Thank you very much. Do the subscribing, the liking, the whatever that you guys do. We appreciate you guys. From me, from Jackson, we'll see you guys later. Take care.
Follow hosts at Just S Baraheni on all socials and at The Lauren Gunn on Twitter. The Objective Basketball Podcast, delivering the NBA to you like no other.